The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. It's Monday, the 28th of April, 2025. We have a great show for you today, a very important show for you today. A lot of young mums to be at Children's Health Defense, a lot of people asking questions. So we decided to get Dr. Stuart Fischbein on this morning to answer some of those questions. And then we have Bella Yon, my daughter, many of you will know from the bus, our tour coordinator, and Claire Dooley, who is also on the bus and now works for Children's Health Defense as well. They're going to be talking about their births and also a new company they set up called Mothers to Be. And then we go for our autism vaccine injury story of the day. So let's bring on Dr. Stuart Fischbein to start with. Good morning, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Polly, for having me. It's great to have an opportunity to reach an audience I don't normally reach, so thank you.
Yeah, no, it's really important that you're here. And I see you're traveling as well at the moment, so we won't keep you long. But we do want to talk about delayed cord clamping because all young mothers, I had no idea when I was a young mum, and many of them just have no idea what that even means and why it's important.
Okay, well, I don't know that anybody really knows what it means because, first of all, up until the mid-1940s or 50s, nobody cut the cord early. It was immediate or delayed cord clamping was something that was brought in the mid-20th century. No other mammal, when it's born, does anyone ever rush in and cut the cord. It's just not done. So why did we start doing it? And then, you can divide it into immediate cord clamping, which is what I did as a resident. We were scrambling to grab the clamps to clamp the cord as fast as possible, show the woman this beautiful thing that she just delivered, and then walk it over to the other side of the room and set it down in the warmer, which is one of the dumbest things you can possibly do. Then, about 15, 20 years ago, they came up with the idea of having delayed cord clamping, which no one really knows what it means, because what is delayed cord clamping? Is it 30 seconds? Is it 60 seconds? Is it 3 minutes? And each organization makes its own rules, but I don't think any of them are backed up by any science. They just do these things. I have this thing called my exact number rule, where when so-called experts tell you something that's exact, like age 35 or 42 weeks or that sort of thing, these numbers are sort of made up. They're not really very scientific at all. So the American College of OBGYN came out with a guideline that says 1 minute of delayed cord clamping, which is completely made up. There's no reason to limit it to 1 minute. 1 minute was brought in the, like I said, or in the mid 20th century to help expedite and make it expedient to get babies in and out and move moms along. It was all done for speed. It was not done for science. It's what I would call, or what Tom Sowell, famous economist, would call stage one thinking. It's like doing something because it sounds good or feels good or serves your purpose, but never asking the question, does it actually do good? When you delay cord clamping, you allow a baby to get its blood volume back. What happens when babies are being born is that a lot of the blood volume is squeezed out of them, maybe up to a third, and it goes off into the placenta, and then it equalizes over time. And so when babies get their blood volume back, then they have less problems with acidosis, they have less problems with anemia, they have better perfusion, they get their stem cells that belong to them. So what is the point of ever cutting the cord, other than on rare occasions where a baby is really in need of doing something? Because that cord is supplying not only blood flow to the baby, but oxygen and glucose and other nutrients while the baby's making that transition from intrauterine life to extrauterine life. So the whole idea of cutting the cord at all is something that was made up. Because again, like I said, in no other mammal do we ever cut the cord. Nobody rushes in when a baby tiger is born or a baby chimpanzee is born and cuts the cord. The placenta usually comes out, the cord falls off. That's, maybe we want to do it after the placenta comes out, and that would be called optimal or no cord clamping whatsoever. So delayed cord clamping is just sort of a made up term, Polly, that serves the purpose of the medical system and not necessarily the benefit of the mother or the baby.
So if you were there delivering the baby, how long would you let that cord be sitting there? I mean,
Sure.
Humphrey says it has to go white. Dr. Humphrey says that. Is that right?
Yeah, well, again, there's even once it goes white, there's no perfusion through it. So what's the point of cutting it? You can cut it if maybe the baby's got a short cord and you want to get the baby up to mom's chest, and there's not enough cord to get, maybe the baby can only come up so far. But otherwise, why cut it? So what I was trained in residencies, you cut it immediately. And then we began to have this delayed cord clamping thing. But what I learned from midwives and from working in the home birthing world for a long time was that you just leave the cord alone. Leave the baby alone. The baby comes out, the mother pulls the baby up onto her chest. You leave the cord alone. You don't pull on the cord. You don't cut the cord. When the uterus is ready, the uterus will expel the placenta. The placenta can go in a bowl or a bag or just lay on the side of the bed, and the blood doesn't flow backwards out of the baby. I've heard that doctors will say we can't hold the baby higher than the placenta because blood will flow out of the baby. That's so ridiculously unscientific that I don't even know. It's embarrassing that someone with a medical degree would say something like that. So there's no reason to cut the cord at all, other than maybe later on just to get it out of the field. But leave it alone. Leave that sacred time with the mother and baby alone. There's no reason you need to meddle with anything.
Dr. Stu, we've had so many people contact us about how they tried to have a home birth, or they tried to go to a birthing center and they were sent to hospital, which puts an enormous amount of stress on a mother, especially if you wanted to plan this amazing home birth. And the minute they get into hospital, they have this ongoing bullying. You need to be sitting on the bed. You need to be jabbed with Pitocin or whatever it is they do. You need to be this. Vitamin A, all the vaccines lined up. It's just so stressful. How do we deal with the bullying of these ghastly people in the hospital? Because they are ghastly. They're mean old things.
Well, there's several things that you can do. Unfortunately, we live in a world right now where the hospital, I don't even know. This is very difficult for me because I think that the people that work at the hospitals want to do good. I think that the people that run the hospitals and the hospitals' goal is not necessarily the same as the families that come there. And so what they're worried about is moving things along. They're following policy. They're blindly doing things without thinking, well, if I do this, then what happens? And they're worried about liability, I suppose, and that sort of thing. So they have their policies, and they feel if they follow their policies, they're more likely to not be sued, or if they're sued, they can defend themselves, which is not a good place to be. But it is part of the system that we have right now, because it is a shift mentality system. There's no continuity of care. Doctors are now employees. They work shifts. They get a salary. The things that make a relationship are not there anymore. So there's this pressure put on families by the hospital system, and therefore the nurses and doctors, to do certain things. What a family can do, and I actually have a handout that I used to give when I was actively practicing, I basically called it what families can do in the face of hospital tyranny. And first of all, you have the right to be informed of everything that's going to be done to you. So they have to take the time to give you all the information that you request, that the pros of what they're doing, the cons of what you're doing, and other options. You should have the right to video what they're telling you. So if somebody's coming in telling you your baby needs to go to the NICU, the newborn intensive care unit, you could say, listen, my mother isn't here and she's a medical person. I want to video this so I can show it to her. And if they say no, that should be a really big red flag, because why should they be telling you anything that they're afraid to have documented? So it's one thing that you can do. Two, if you're really being treated badly, you can fire your caregiver and ask for somebody else to come in. And one of the important things that I learned when I was doing this process was that every person in the hospital has the right to ask for either an ethics consult or to speak to the chaplain or the rabbi. So if things are getting heated because they want to give your baby a hepatitis vaccine, and you don't want to give your baby a hepatitis vaccine, you can say, excuse me, time out. I want to talk to the ethics person in your hospital. And by the regulation, the hospital has to do that. They have to honor that. So that's one thing that can slow things down and call it and slow and pause for a second so that things can cool down a little bit. So those are some of the things that you can do. I don't know if that answered the question. The use of coercion, Polly, the use of things like, if we don't do this, your baby will die, or we're going to call Child Protective Services, or, your insurance won't pay, is completely impermissible. It's so strongly worded against it through the American Medical Association and the American College of OBGYN. And yet what happens is the hospital will follow certain clinical protocols and they'll ignore others. And this is one of the ones that they'll ignore. And it is ethically impermissible for them to use these things, and they do it all the time. So being prepared before you go to the hospital, making sure you trust your caregiver. If you're not comfortable there, maybe you'll have to travel 20 or 30 miles or 50 miles to go someplace else. But you shouldn't wait for the last minute for this to happen. You should plan these things way ahead of time, and you should know your hospital system.
Yeah, I mean, I when I was giving birth to my first child, who's about to come on in a minute, but a nurse was screaming at me for not putting my baby into one of those plastic cot things that are next to the bed. I mean, screaming at me that all babies have to go in the cot. And then they took her away saying, oh, she had jaundice, and they were jabbing her and she was screaming. It was just a really horrible experience. But you're frightened as a young mother. You've just given birth, and these doctors, and if you disagree on something, they'll send another one in, or they'll go to your husband and try and bully him. It's a terrible situation.
Yeah, I mean, you can control anybody when you throw fear out there, and when you do that. But it's absolutely again, why do good people do certain things like that? And it's sort of what happens is there's sort of a mass formation of people working in the hospital. They think they're doing good without actually knowing whether they're doing good. And it gets down to the point where I think there's pressure put upon the employees to do certain things, whether it's financial or their job or whatever. But ultimately what happens is no matter what their intent is, they've forgotten what their humanity is, and it doesn't matter because it's about outcomes. And if you look at things like delayed cord clamping, active management of the third stage, giving hepatitis vaccine, epidurals, more ultrasounds, more C-sections, are our outcomes improving? And the answer is no, they're not. They're getting worse. So if we continue down the path of doing all the things that they say they need to do, why don't they look at their outcomes and say, we're making all these babies get separated from their mother and go to the nursery, or the rate of admission to the newborn intensive care unit has doubled over the last 15 years. The rate of postpartum hemorrhage has doubled over the last 15 years, despite all the things we're doing. So maybe what we're doing needs to be reevaluated, but they don't do that. They don't stop and think about that. So again, it's a bad time for a parent when like you said, you are being told that getting yelled at by somebody, that's so inappropriate. That's why I'm saying you need witnesses, you need videotaping, and maybe you need to stay out of the hospital.
Yeah. Well, we have a couple of questions for you that's coming in. Somebody asking, they would love to talk about twins and how you can still have a home birth. Can you have a home birth with twins? I mean, that's
absolutely. Okay. Absolutely, you can. Again, the medicalized birth model works on an algorithm. So they consider everyone with twins to be the same. If you have what are called di twins, you need to be delivered by such and such. You need ultrasound so often. If you have mono-di twins, you have to do it this way. The midwifery model of care, which isn't always practiced by every midwife, gets to individualize their care. So because I was well trained, I was lucky. I was trained in an era where twins and breeches were just considered a variation of normal. There wasn't all this fear surrounding them. That's been introduced over the last 30 or 40 years. And I trained before that. So I had the skills to do these things. And the hospital makes it such a medicalized event that they're setting themselves up for failure. If you're going to have twins in the hospital, they're going to want you to be monitored continuously. They're going to want you in bed. They're going to want you to have an IV. They're going to want you to have an epidural. They're going to want you to deliver in the OR, where they have 10 people you've never met before standing around waiting for the babies to come out. It's conducive to failure. When you're in the home setting, you can do twins. And when you don't meddle with Mother Nature, You don't see this scary rapid deterioration of the fetal status that everybody's talking about, where thank God we have an operating room down the hall. The whole idea of having an operating room nearby makes it far more likely that you're going to end up using it, because the things that they do, the starvation, the immobilization, the interruption, the hyperstimulation with Pitocin, the numbing with the epidural, are far more likely to make it that you need the operating room that's necessary. So, I mean, look at 50 years ago, the C-section rate in our country was 5%. It's 32% and rising now. And that's a 600-fold increase, and have outcomes improved. Again, it gets back to that basic, ask yourself the question, have neonatal death dropped? Has cerebral palsy dropped? Has anything changed? Has, getting back to your original topic, has immediate cord clamping been beneficial to our babies? And the answer is no. Who's it beneficial? Who are all these things beneficial for? They're for the system, to move you in and move you out, and to get you to do what they want you to do. And the fact that you were bullied, Polly, is unconscionable. It's unconscionable. And yet it goes on every single day. And we know that. There's story after story after story. I know you have a busy inbox. My inbox is filled with these things every single day. Of people telling me stories and asking me the question that you just asked me. Can breeches and twins? And why is some woman who's a type 1 diabetic, who's well controlled, who may have even better blood sugars than you and I, why do they have to be induced at 38 weeks and have the baby go to the NICU because they need to be watched for their blood sugar? Why can't they deliver at home and see what happens with good observational care? But that's not the way it works, because the hospital doesn't do that. They cannot think out of their box.
I have so many questions for you, and we're running out of time. A quick question on scans. Do you recommend scans or no?
Well, that's going to take up the rest of our time, but I'll do as fast as I can. Women can have babies without ultrasound. Okay. Up until 1970, less than 10% of women had an ultrasound during their pregnancy. Now, I think about 40 to 50% have at least 3 or 4 per pregnancy. I'll ask the same question again. Despite all the ultrasounds, all the color flow Doppler, all that investigation, have our outcomes gotten better? And the answer is no. Yes. Can ultrasound find something that might have been a problem? Have they not done an ultrasound? Absolutely. Any of these things can. A broken clock, as you know, is right twice a day. The problem, of course, is that what kind of problems are they causing by finding things that aren't a problem and then causing the mother to be nervous and fearful the entire pregnancy because they found something that, like a small calcification in the heart or dilation of the kidney, which doesn't mean anything. But that the women will not hear that her baby is normal. They'll only hear the one thing that isn't, that doesn't mean anything. So ultrasounds, yes, they're very valuable, but they don't need to be done on an algorithm. They need to be individualized. But the medicalized birth system doesn't allow for doctors and nurses to use that wonderful training that they spent 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years of their life getting, only to come out to be told what to do by risk managers and administrators. It's got to be frustrating. I don't know why anyone really wants to go to medical school anymore.
No, I understand that. Right, quick question. I know we're out of time, Lou. Just one quick question. What specific medical or pregnancy-related conditions would warrant a planned hospital birth, if any, and how to make this a positive experience? So a question.
Placenta previa is absolutely something that should be done in the hospital. And then everything else is individualized. True fetal growth restriction, not fake fetal growth restriction. And again, I don't really have time to get into that. I would love to talk about, I could spend the whole 20 minutes talking about the overcalling of fetal growth restriction by maternal fetal medicine doctors who tend to fatten their wallets by the fact that the more ultrasounds they do, the more money they make. So why wouldn't they find things that, I know this is going to piss off a lot of people, but ultimately you look at the way the system is designed. It's designed to create more billable codes and billable things. That's the way it's designed. That's how doctors and hospitals are paid. So placenta previa is one thing like that. Severe intrauterine growth restriction, preeclampsia, but things like twins, breeches, well-controlled diabetes, well-controlled hypertension, those things don't necessarily need to be born in a hospital setting. You don't need an IV if you're drinking. You don't need to be monitored. Continuous fetal monitoring over the last 50 years has done nothing but raise the C-section rate. It has not done what they hoped it would do. They thought it was going to lower the rate of cerebral palsy and stillbirth or neonatal death. It didn't. All it's done is caused more interventions, and that whole cascade that hopefully your listeners know about. When one thing leads to another thing leads to another thing.
A mother recently told me that she was told she was high risk and had to go to hospital. And she said, "Why am I high risk?" And they said, "Because you're old." And she was 35.
Yeah.
And she was told she had to go to hospital.
Do I have time to talk about this? Do I have time to talk about this?
Yes, please.
Okay, good. I'd love to. All right. So if you ask any doctor what high risk means, they don't know, because high risk is not a number. High risk is something that makes your provider uncomfortable, because they will label a woman who's 35 to be high risk, and then they'll tell her she needs to be induced. But which actually carries more risk? The induction or being over 35? The induction carries more risk, but which is labeled high risk? Age 35. High risk is a way to get people to do what you want them to do. And I don't know that there's any woman that makes it through her pregnancy these days without being labeled with something. I mean, the American College of OBGYN in one of their own guidelines says this, Polly. They say pregnancy itself is a high-risk condition. So if this is the prism by which OBGYNs and nurses see pregnancy, you can understand why they are so nervous all the time and so fearful about pregnancy, because they consider the pregnant woman herself to be high risk. But high risk, again, like I said, is not a number. Age 35, 42 weeks, 24 hours of ruptured membranes, 1 minute of delayed cord clamping. Certain these do not make a woman high risk, because high risk is not a number. There are certain things that they will do to a woman, as I said earlier, that carry more statistical risk of a problem than the actual thing they're treating. But they don't care about that, because they're concerned about nature's risks. They're not concerned about their interventions risks. They don't look at them. They just don't. There's a sort of a blockage, or what's called cognitive dissonance, where they make it very hard to see what they're doing is wrong. Because again, it gets back to the basic question of outcomes. How are we doing in 2025 compared to how we were doing in 2020, 2010, 1970? How are we doing? I'm not going back 100 years, but I'm going back to the modern era, and we're doing a lot worse now than we were 50 years ago.
Well, Dr. Stuart, we are so grateful for everything that you do. Now, your website, birthinginstincts.com, you also have a podcast, do you not?
Yeah, I do. And thank you, Polly, for the opportunity to just even wet the whistle on this topic, because I give a 2-day seminar on this when I go around teaching, and I talk about this for about 16 hours. So to try to squeeze it into 22 minutes or something like that was hard for me. But and maybe I went off on that. But the podcast is the Birthing Instincts podcast, where Bliss and I talk about stuff every week that pregnant people may find interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've got big plans for you, Dr. Fischbein. We're going to get you back on again, please. The work you do is amazing, and so many young mums need to hear from you. So thank you, and safe travels.
Thank you, Polly.
Okay. All right, everyone. Well, fantastic. Now we are going to bring on Bella Yon and Claire Dooley, both from the bus, both worked at Children's Health Defence. And we have a lot more young mums at Children's Health Defence getting ready to have babies. Our Caroline, who was on the bus as well, she's getting ready to have a baby. So we thought we'd do more on this subject, and we want to hear why you both set up, Bella, why you set up Mothers to Be. But first thing we want to do is talk about your births. So I'm actually going to start with you, Claire, because your birth didn't quite go as planned. And I think this is a very important story, because Claire, Bella, Caroline, Naomi, all of our young mums set out with this real holistic birth they wanted to have. And Claire's took a different turning. And it's the first time Claire's talked about this. So it's very brave of you to come on and talk about it, Claire. So let's start with you, and then we'll go to Belle's, and then we'll talk about why we set up Mothers to Be. Or you, so.
Well, thanks for having us on, Polly. Yeah, so whenever I first found out that I was pregnant, I was actually on the bus. And that was a really interesting experience. And, you can hear more about that in our film Vax 3, where I talk about my experience being pregnant on the bus. But yeah, from the beginning, I was instantly clamoring to find all the things. And like Dr. Sue just talked about, I opted to do just the one ultrasound at 20 weeks. I stayed really active. I traveled my whole pregnancy and, just continued to honestly, I felt really great my whole pregnancy. I was living in Austin at the time, and then I had to move to DC where my fiance lives. And so in Austin, I had a midwife there that lived right next or practiced right next door to the chiropractor that we see. So, it was really great having care done by her. And then once I moved to DC, I had to switch practice to a birth center. And, Washington, DC, you're in the middle of a city. I didn't know what the hospital systems would be like here. So I knew I wanted to give birth outside of a city. And it seemed to me like my best option was a birth center. And, we were freshly moving, so I didn't really feel comfortable giving birth at home. And so, yeah, opted for the birth center. But immediately I did know that it seemed a little bit more corporatized, right? So you had 5 or 6 midwives, each had a nurse with them. And, whenever I would have my care done with them, some of them knew I was a little more crunchy. They knew I had said to them expressly several times, I don't want vitamin K. They didn't do hepatitis B there. But I really had talked to them so much so that one of the nurses brought up the Tdap shot, I believe, or one of the pregnancy vaccines you get. And she was like, oh, I assume somebody's brought this up with you before. And the midwives that I've been seeing knew not to bring it up with me because they knew I was going to say no. So, I was pretty confident in the care I would get there. So on a Friday night, my water broke, and all the next day, Saturday, I was just in early labor, and my fiance was actually out of town. So that kind of was the first wrench because I didn't feel comfortable. I was alone in DC without anyone here, no family, no fiance. And so I went and stayed at a hotel near the birth center and labored there. And then whenever Cameron came and met me, I started going into full-blown labor. It was crazy. As soon as he got there, it was like this hit, my body felt comfortable and it started really speeding along. So as my labor began progressing, at this point, and I'll just go ahead and give you a little spoiler early on in the story, I started feeling a lot of pressure and I didn't understand why. And my urethra was being pinched by baby's head. And so I wasn't peeing all day. And as a pregnant woman, we know how intense that can be. You have to go every 20 minutes in your last trimester. And nobody at the birth center caught it, and nobody at the hospital caught it when I later transferred. So anyways, I moved to the birth center. There, once again, I'm still having this pressure, and baby's heart rate is raising. And they said that her heart rate was in the 200s somewhere. And even though I had opted from before to not do continuous fetal monitoring, it ended up happening that way. And so, then they said, oh, well, maybe you're dehydrated. Let's give you more water. So they tried that. I started drinking more and more water, but as you know, that probably was making the problem worse because I wasn't going to the bathroom still. And so then they opted to give me an IV. They're pumping fluids in me. And once again, heart rate's still high for me and the baby. And so, I'm in full-blown labor. I'm in active labor. I'm at 8 centimeters dilated when they're telling me this. So I have no way to process what's happening to me. And they say, and my fiance had really been advocating on my behalf the entire time, saying, we don't want to transfer to the hospital. We don't want to transfer. But they come to me and they say, look, like there's a very high chance that we're going to have a sick baby on our hands because of this baby's heart rate being so high. So even though you could give birth here, you might have to transfer to the hospital, and you don't want to do that. And so I had a prayer group of 40 people praying for me my whole pregnancy and my whole labor. And I really felt the presence of God, and I knew that I was going to be okay. And so I just had to trust that everything was going to be fine. So we're transferring to the hospital. It was a non-emergent transfer, so we didn't have to go in the ambulance. And we're on the way. I'm full-blown laboring. I'm making all the sounds. And I stop in between contractions, and I turn to Cameron and I say, Cameron, what's the one rule? Because I had really, prepped him on this. I said, what's the one rule? And he says, we don't let her out of our sight. I said, you don't let her out of your sight. and immediately went back into labor land. And we got to the hospital and, they checked us in, got us back there. And I was a bit comforted. I had 2 nurses attending my birth and an OB. And one of the nurses had actually given birth twice at the birth center I was at. So she knew what I wanted. I talked to her about the delayed cord clamping, whatever that means now that Dr. Seuss was on. I talked to her about not having the vitamin K. And when I say talk to, I'm muttering this under my breath between contractions. And yeah, but they did insist that I had Pitocin, and there was this whole energy that we have to have this baby ASAP, because their whole theory was that I had some kind of infection because our heart rates were higher. And so they gave me Pitocin, which made my contractions unbearably painful, but I stuck through them. And once again, all the while, bladder's still not emptying. And I ended up pushing for 3.5 hours, and I didn't want to push on my back. I had an IV, so I kind of had no other choice. I didn't want to push for 3.5 hours. I wanted to wait to push until I really felt the need. But once again, the OB comes in and says, look, you've got like 5 hours. And within 5 hours, like, I'm going to be tugging the line on my license being pulled, and we're going to have to give you a C-section. So I was really kind of forced to play into that model of the system that Dr. Stu was just talking about. And I knew that was happening to me. I knew exactly what was happening. All the while, as a mother, you should never have to be experiencing that while you're giving birth, having to protect yourself, when you should just be able to focus on your job, which is bringing this baby into the world, and relax and let go. And so, yeah, so I pushed for 3.5 hours, and she finally came into the world. And it was the most amazing feeling ever, getting her on my chest and hearing her cries, and just knowing that it was over after almost 48 hours of labor. And unfortunately, that was just the beginning of my horrific experience from there on in the hospital. And I will spare you the details, but Dr. Stu talked a lot about your placenta being removed naturally, and the OB and the hospital staff decided that it needed to be removed manually because of this supposed infection. And so there was a lot of hard things that I went through with that. But all the while, Cameron knew who his job was, and he followed the baby over to the edge of the room. And, they're talking to him. She needs the vitamin K. She needs the hepatitis B. She really needs the vitamin K because she just had a traumatic birth. And all the while, he's just saying, look, I'm not going to tell you I'm not going to change my mind, because she told me what she wants, and that's what we're going to do. And my doula later told me that at a certain point, Cameron got a little snappy with them and said, look, like the last 3 times you asked, it's going to be a no. And he protected her. And ultimately, I was able to have a vaginal birth with no epidural. And by the end of the night, I had a little baby laying on me who had had no extra interventions. And actually, her APGAR score was 9 within 10 minutes of birth. So this whole transfer was unnecessary. And then the OB asked the question, when was the last time she went to the bathroom, and proceeded to use a catheter and emptied almost 2 liters of fluids from me. So in my mind as a mother, I think that was the issue that made me transfer to the hospital that nobody caught. And yeah, I proceeded to spend 3 days in the hospital. Polly, your sentiments about, how rude these nurses were to you. It was similar for me, and I was really ready to get out. One of the days I was crying, and I was like, Cameron, I want to come home. And I did. And when I came home, it was the best feeling. And the little girl has been completely safe, and we're all good. So.
But Claire, thank you for telling us that story, because it was traumatic, and there's much more to talk on that. But let's go to Bella now, because Bella has had 2 births. You tell Bella, tell us about your 2 births.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I love talking all things birth, so I'm happy to be here. So I had my first birth in 2021 with the birth of my son. It was actually an interesting experience because I had a home birth at my midwife's house, which was a really fun experience. I had the most incredible birth team, and that's why I'm so passionate about, empowering mothers to really interview all midwives and find someone you really, really bond with. My midwife, grew to be one of my dear friends, and I still message her a lot now. So had amazing birth team. It was a longer labor than I probably anticipated. It was around 16 to 18 hours, and I was very nauseous. So that was my one kind of takeaway from my birthing experience with my son Theo. I was vomiting throughout and was very weak. So really just emphasizing the importance of fluids and eating during labor. A lot of hospitals say no eating, no drinking. My midwife was the complete opposite. She was like, you must get fluids, you must get food to keep your energy up. So it was an amazing birth experience, truly, overall, and I'm just very grateful for that. That's me with Theo. And then so my experience with my daughter Flora was a little bit unique. At the beginning of my pregnancy, I just moved to Florida. And I was struggling to find a midwife who would take me because I had some autoimmune flare-ups, and a lot of midwives around here, there aren't many, but the few midwives around here that I had spoken to were a little bit nervous of accepting me on as a client because they were worried that I was high risk. So it was really interesting to hear Dr. Stu talk about high risk and what actually high risk is. So I actually had 2 appointments it was a birth center at a hospital with midwives, but it did feel very clinical, and especially compared to my first birth with my amazing birth team. It was really eye-opening to me how it really wasn't individualized. Again, Dr. Stu talked a lot about that. It was very protocol. I mean, I would drive 1 hour to this hospital. I'd sit in the waiting room for 1 hour, and I'd go in there for 10 minutes, and they'd just say, is everything all right? Do you want a scan? Do you want a vaccine? Do you want XYZ? And then they just send me home. So it just felt very sterilized. I felt like they didn't truly care about me and my daughter. And so I really decided that I just wasn't going to do that, and I would have to find a midwife that would accept me. And actually my mum was really encouraging to that too. She said, don't give up, find someone. And I managed to find an amazing midwife who would accept me. And I mean, my autoimmune actually ended up going into remission, and of course wasn't a factor anyway. But I did have an incredible home birth in the end with my daughter Flora, much shorter labor. It was 6 hours. There she is eating some food. And it was wonderful. It was peaceful. I was in the comfort of my home. And yeah, it was about 6 hours. I would say the last hour was just intense. Both times I gave birth to my babies in water, which I highly recommend. Just takes a lot of the pressure and the pain off. It was intense. I'm not gonna lie, it was intense, but it was beautiful. And then I just hopped right out of the birth tub into bed, and we just lay there with the placenta and me and the baby, and it was just blissful and lovely. So I had 2 overall really encouraging and positive birth stories, and I just pray that that's what every woman gets to experience once in their life, because there's nothing like it.
And this has inspired you, Bells, to set up Mothers to Be.
Yes.
And you're also involved in Mothers to Be, and I think this is wonderful. Young people doing this. But tell me how this is different to other apps or other websites that have this kind of thing. I mean, this is not a unique idea, but why are you doing this? Is there a need that's different?
Absolutely. So I think both Claire and I experienced this during pregnancy, and we chatted about it a lot. We were just getting a little frustrated that most other apps out there, or, websites specifically catered to pregnancy and birth, weren't covering all the things that we have learned from CHD and being a part of this team, and just knowing the people that we know. And we just felt like mothers were not getting the information needed to have successful births and pregnancies. And there was also no discussion about preconception health. And I'm a clinical nutritionist. I went to school and got my master's in nutrition, and I know firsthand how important the health of the mother and the father is prior to even conceiving. And again, we just were not finding this information specifically tailored to mothers and couples looking to conceive and carry throughout, honestly, the first year of life. And so we really felt empowered to put all this information together. Thankfully, my father, who is also a clinical nutritionist, had been actually working on this over many, many years. And so we thought we need to make this relatable and, in the hands of women, so that they can get this information and feel empowered to really have amazing birth experience and healthy babies.
Now, do you address vaccinations? Because I do know, I can imagine if I was a young mum, knowing what I knew now, the pressure, you need your DTaP, or what happens when they're born? Do I need the Hep B? Do you address those things?
Absolutely. We address everything from vaccines to scans to any kind of interventions you'll be offered throughout pregnancy, throughout birth and beyond, especially in the first year. That's why we really wanted to also focus on the first year. Again, we just really want mothers to have all this information and education so that they can feel really confident in the decisions that they are making for their children. So we really wanted to make it comprehensive, covering all the different medical interventions from vaccines, as well as the more holistic approach like nutrition and things like that. So on the website, you'll find absolutely everything. It's free. There's also a free birth plan you can print out, which I recommend doing, even if you think you're going to have a home birth. Claire's a prime example of that. Print out this birth plan, because if you do need to be transferred for any reason, then you can go in with a hard copy and say, this is what I want for my birth. Do not touch my baby. And here is the proof of that. So hopefully
I would also love to say that, like, during my pregnancy, the first person I told was my mom that I was pregnant. And second person ended up being Polly, because she was just, knew somehow.
Let's be honest. I said to Claire, I said, either you're pregnant or I'm going to have to fire you because your behavior is really weird.
And
I was joking, everybody, but I knew something was up.
Yeah, she said, "Are you pregnant?" And then the third person I ended up telling was Bella, because I thought I knew a lot. I knew about the shots and I knew about some basic things, but whenever you actually get pregnant, you get all of this information thrown at you. And that was what made me want to join Bella and Jonathan with Mothers to Be, because I realized it's not all in one place. You can find little tidbits of information all over the internet, but there's no one place where a mother can go to find everything she needs to know about preconception, pregnancy, postpartum, the first year. And like Bella said, there's a birth plan you can find. There's a nutrient deficiencies assessment, so you can take this self questionnaire and figure out what you're actually nutrient deficient in, which is amazing. And a lot of doctors don't address pre-pregnancy, preconception, and during pregnancy. There's also toxins and lifestyle assessment. So you can look at your life and see, okay, what's in my shampoo? What's in my food? What's on all these things that would affect my fertility? And so once again, where can you find this information anywhere else? You couldn't. So Bella made Mothers to Be along with Jonathan Tommy, and I've come onto the team as director of marketing, because I really believe in this. Bella's one of my closest friends, and she was one of the people I texted my entire pregnancy asking her for help. And I want every woman to have Bella in her pocket, where they can go to her and see, what can we do about anything that's thrown at us, especially with Bella's pregnancy, where she had a technical high-risk pregnancy and, still was able to have a home birth. Every woman should have that opportunity. And so, yeah, I'm really happy that we've started doing this.
Well, I'm very proud of you. Now, so Bella and Claire, how can people follow you? Motherstobe.com is obviously a website. And what are you on social media wise?
Yeah, so we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. I don't think we're on Twitter yet, but Instagram and Facebook, we mainly do a lot of our postings. And is there anywhere else you can find us, Bella? Maybe an email we can give people?
Yeah, you can also email info@motherstobe.com if you have any questions. We do some blog posts too. There are a lot of healthy recipes on our site, but we're always willing, and open to hearing from you guys. And if you have questions or need any resources, we can direct you and just really pray that you get the information that you need. So please contact us, and we would love to have you as part of our little community.
Yeah, and Bella is also doing consultations now, which is awesome. So if you want to have a consult with her, you can book a consult on the website. And I think they're about 20 minutes to start or something like that. Bella, you can tell them more about it.
Yeah, we have little intro calls just to work one-on-one, and then we can book something longer and really just deep dive. Again, Dr. Stuart mentioned it a lot. Pregnancy is so individual, and preconception, and this entire journey. We are all so different, and our bodies are different, and our pregnancies are different, our babies are different. So it's really important, I think, that you, focus on what's going on with you and address anything that may be coming up.
And the only thing missing, I hear from you both, is that you are trying to raise funds to do an app, because in this day and age, apparently that's what everybody wants. So if anyone out there knows how to build an app or has the funds to help these two get their mothers to be off, do contact them as well, because I think it's really, I'm so proud of you both, and because educating the young, this is the future, and it will stop all of those ghastly births that so many of us have had because we were bullied and we didn't know any better. So thank you for the work you're both doing. And motherstobe.com, everybody go over there, follow them and get involved. Thank you both for being on the show this morning, Bella and Claire. All right, everybody, we're going to go to our autism story of the day. We will continue to play these for the rest of April, not many days left. And then May is coming up and we're going to focus on, did you know that you could die from a vaccine? We're going to be focusing on deaths following vaccinations with the babies, with the toddlers. So that is going to be our theme for May. And we'll continue to do this until people understand that these vaccines are very unsafe, very dangerous, can and do cause autism, can and do cause death, amongst many other conditions as well. So that's it from me today. Pray big, my friends, stand firm, never settle, and we will be back tomorrow.
Hi, I'm Natalie Renee Steffen.
And you have a story about your child, yes?
Yes, I have a son who was vaccine injured at 15 months after he had 5 vaccinations. He was vaccinated, unfortunately, 32 times before I put everything together as far as him being what caused him to fall into the regression of severe autism, being severely autistic. The 5 vaccines that actually pushed him over the edge into severe autism, where he woke up the next day and he was completely a different child personality-wise, was the MMR, the measles, mumps, rubella. He had the varicella shot and he had the influenza shot. So when he went to the pediatrician prior to that, from birth all the way up, he was getting vaccinated. I was doing everything I thought that I should be doing, and I was told by my pediatrician that was recommended to be the best health care that would be provided for my child. So I listened to what everybody said. I didn't do any research on this. And when he received those 5 vaccines, he went to bed. When he woke up the next day, my son was screaming constantly. So my son was throwing himself on the ground, screaming. He was starting to lay up onto the edge of the arm of the couch. He was pressing his gut up. He was rocking back and forth. The course of his regression, it wasn't immediate, so I didn't put everything together so quickly because he did not break out in a rash. He did at that time. He didn't actually have seizures in front of me. So it took me a while to understand what exactly had happened to him, and it took me going to a psychologist and getting a diagnosis. But the screaming and the crying and the tantrums and the biting and the hitting and the screaming and us bringing him into our normal life that we had of taking him grocery shopping and doing all those things had completely changed. He started melting down every single time that we went out into public. So there was about a 2-year course where my husband and I could not take our child out anymore, and we had to do it as a dual team. And as soon as my son started to freak out and scream, cry, my husband would just take our son away and I would finish grocery shopping. It got to the point so bad that my son was so strong and the tantrums were so heavy that I could no longer take my son out like I used to on my own and do errands with him. So we did this as a team. I went home and said, no more. I'm sick of crying in the car. I'm sick of trying to force my kid to be in a chair, in getting back into his car seat. He was arching his back. He was screaming. He was getting violent. He went through multiple violent episodes, and this would go on in and out during the day. So he would be fine. All of a sudden something would happen and his complete personality changed. So I took him back to the pediatrician. That did not matter. Me explaining to her about the tantrums and all of that, she was more interested in, he's hit every single milestone. He's had words. Now, where is he at now in his speech? I said, well, he's screaming all the time and he's not using his speech anymore. So she recommended me to go to Vanderbilt Hospital to get him analyzed to see if maybe he had a speech delay. When I told her that people were mentioning, because his eye contact started to disappear, that people are mentioning the word autism, she looked at me like I was crazy and said, he doesn't have autism. He hit every single milestone that any child would ever achieve. We do have a total of 4 kids, so we do have We have 2 children that we raised up prior to him. There was nothing different that we saw in our son before this vaccine injury that we did in our 2 older daughters. We do have another child who is non-vaccinated because of all the research that I've done and because of what I've witnessed in my son. We have a little girl. She just turned 3.
You have 3 girls and a boy.
Yes. So we went into Vanderbilt Hospital. I was concerned that my son had lost his hearing because he literally had regressed. They had told me that you're going to be on a wait list for about 9 months to a year before a psychologist can actually analyze your son and give your son a diagnosis. So during that course of time, my child regressed so far. And when we took him in, the first thing I did, we sat down with a bunch of psychologists and they asked us a bunch of questions. Then the next time I said, hey, you guys need to check out his hearing because I am literally calling my son. He does not turn his head. He doesn't even acknowledge when a human being walks into the room. He doesn't even know who his sisters are anymore, and he does not know who mommy and daddy is anymore. So I think something's wrong with his hearing. So they went in and they checked his hearing. He scored high. He had perfect hearing. So that clued in to me something major went wrong in his body, and I had to find out what it was. So the next appointment was us going into a psychologist and him talking to us and saying, can you excuse me, I'm going to analyze your child. So my husband and I and our kids left, and he sat in the room with Landon. Within 15 minutes, he called us back in, and he's like, okay, I'm done. I said, you're done? He said, yeah, I'm done. And he said, your son is severely autistic. And I said, what do you mean severely autistic? That doesn't make sense to me. He said he doesn't understand anybody. He doesn't see anybody. He does not have the compassion, a need, a recognition of knowing that anybody is around him. He's fixated on whatever he is thinking about, and he will do anything to get what his mind is focused on. But any kind of human beings, any kind of compassion, any kind of feeling towards anybody else is not there. So I started asking a whole bunch of questions because I could not understand it. And my first question was, how does a perfectly healthy child who has words, vocabulary, spoke to us, ran to my arms, hugged, kissed us, played with his sisters, put his toys away, hit all these milestones, how does he go to this blank, empty person? And he looked me in the eyes and said, I don't have the answers for you. Autism is a mystery, and we believe it's genetic. I said, it's not genetic. My son was not born this way. How did this happen? And he said, I'm not sure. And here's a list of therapists that will be able to help you. So my husband and I and our whole family left, and I left with the same child, just with the label placed on him. So I went home and I dug in and I said, I know something happened to him. I am not going to believe what they tell me. I am going to research on my own. And that's exactly what I did. I started digging into what is autism? What went on? What went on during, this is when I noticed it. What period of time did I change anything that could have affected this child so much? And it clicked on me. Okay, he went to the pediatrician's office. He had a baby well check visit. He had 5 vaccinations. I pulled up all his records and I went through those 5 vaccines. I pulled up the CDC website and I started reading the ingredients. And a lot of the ingredients are in codes or in their big words. So then I started Googling, what does this actually mean? What is this ingredient? And then I started finding out they could use simple words to tell you what the ingredients are, but no, they use these words so that it throws people off, so that they don't know the actual toxins and poisons that they're putting inside their children. So then I was coming across animal DNA and human DNA and neurotoxins and roach killer and laundry detergent. And I was floored when I found out what I was putting in my child. So then I started going on and saying, this is what happened, and how dare the FDA approve these kind of ingredients to be injected into a child. So then I started studying the body and what these chemicals do once they're inside the body. Then I went ahead and started finding on YouTube videos other parents that had the same exact story, because I thought I was the only mom that had an autistic child, since nobody in my whole entire life had ever mentioned autism to me, ever mentioned vaccinations to me. So I thought I was the only person out there in the world and felt so alone. And when I discovered all of these YouTube videos, written testimonies, and then began friend requesting people because I needed friends personally on Facebook, I was opened up to a world that I never thought existed, and realized that this is going on worldwide. Around the world, millions of people have the same exact story. They are not lying. This happened to their child. They have proof. They have proof of children, pictures, smiling, interacting, videos, and all of a sudden, after regression, their child is not the same anymore. So today my child is 7 years old. He's currently 7. He's going to be 8 in January. I've been healing his body for 4 years. I've removed all vaccinations from him, removed him for my moral choice. I removed him from a pediatrician that will even hold a vaccination in their office, because I know vaccines shed. I've researched so much on vaccines for the last 4 years. This is my life. I go out and I speak about this to every single person. I do it in love because I love them, and I do it kindly because I don't want them to walk away and say, she's a bully, she's pushing something on me. I don't. I throw out the truth there, and I want them to know, and it's each individual's decision whether they want to actually apply that to their own life, or if they want to continue to go down the route that they're going. But in moral choices, I removed them from pediatricians, never ever allowed another drop of medication from a doctor to be placed into my son's system, put him on homeopathic care, put him on holistic care, got him right into a chiropractor, and our whole family does all of this. This is a whole lifestyle for all of us now. It's educated our whole entire family, and that's exactly what I've done. So right now we are specifically doing all holistic care, chiropractic care. We've done the diet, and we're doing NAET, which is holistic, Chinese holistic, homeopathic energy healing. So each person, each mom has a different route that they want to take. And I've tried certain things, and he has come so far. He has interaction with he's still nonverbal, he's still in diapers, but he does have interaction with his sisters. He does know who mommy and daddy is. He does run back up into our arms and give us hugs and kisses. He does follow commands. He has come a long way, and I do get the privilege of hearing mommy once in a while, little words that come out sporadically from him. So we are seeing a huge change, and I'm ecstatic. Those little things are everything, and the most important thing was health, bringing his health back, restoring his health. Without health, how can he learn? And that was my whole thing, is you have to have your child's health back in order to be able to academically pick up the training and the therapies. So that's the route that I took with my son.
And your son's here, isn't he? Where is he?
My son is in the car because it's pouring rain.
It's actually really pouring rain.
Yes, it's out there pouring rain. Yeah, he is out in the car.
Rain, so he would be out.
He's very good. My son does not do meltdowns. For 2 years, he was extremely violent. And I'm talking extremely violent. And when people look at him today, they're like, oh no, your son's so cute. He smiles, he laughs. Yeah, he does. That's because he's covered in a whole bunch of love, covered in a whole bunch of prayer. And I have healed him majorly. And I'm going to continue to heal him. I mean, it's not like he's off the spectrum. Believe me, he's still in the severe category. But he doesn't melt down because he's not in major pain. So he's on supplements, he's on a clean diet, and he is seeing a holistic doctor once a week, and that's what we've chosen. He does do chiropractor. We adjust him once a month. So that's the route we've taken, and I just want to encourage people. vaccines do injure. This does happen. I'm never going to stop talking about it. I witnessed it. Some people feel like they have to witness it with their own eyes. You don't have to. We love you and we want to warn you, and that's why we speak out about it. And hopefully, if you trust somebody by their character, by the way they conduct themselves, and by the research they've done, that you'll listen to them and that you will actually take this to heart, and this will urge you to also research for yourself. So,
Well, thank you so much for telling your story.
oh, thank
and
you
you signed
so
a bus,
much.
have you?
Yes, I did. Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, good.
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.